38, 39 years. On top of that, my middle school principal. So anytime you got in trouble, or I got in trouble, or my friends got in trouble, where do you think they went? Right. You went to Mrs. Foster's office. That wasn't fun. So 38 years as a teacher at the same institution here in Lexington, at the Lexington School. And my dad had 40 years at one institution here at UK. 40 years. So I'm only halfway to what they've done, but I think it speaks to loyalty. I think it speaks to sticking to something and committing to it. And ultimately, that's why I believe J&J is such a great place for me, because it's allowed me to grow and develop. And that's one of the themes I want you to take away from today, is that you can get that type of sticking power with a company like J&J if you so seek it. I'll tell you another story here. Just imagine, if you will. So I told you about my mother, who, if I ever got in trouble there, imagine having this as your third-year therapeutic professor. Yeah. With Dr. Kuhn, right? With Dr. Recker, with all these leaders, right? And there will be a feeling I will never forget. And it's back in the day. I don't know how are tests passed back these days? Probably through online, right? All electronic, yeah. But back in the day, the tests were passed out literally hand by hand, hand by hand. And I'll never forget, I don't even remember what test it was, but the tests were being passed out, and Dr. Tom Foster was handing me my test that I had just taken. I took the test. I hadn't even looked at the grade yet. And he just put his hand on my shoulder and says, maybe you should come to my office later. Good times, good times. But nevertheless, I think that was part of the standard that he expected. There were no freebies. There was nothing handed out. It was a tough it up type of way of learning. And I thank him for that. And I also thank my professors, Dr. Kuhn and others who are in the room, and I can't see everybody, for exacting that same standard that I know is established. UK is still a top 10 institution in pharmacy. So moving on, I want to give you a little bit of perspective about a phrase that I believe resonates with you, right? Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Okay? As I think about my career here as a student at the University of Kentucky versus my career as a student at Center College. Center College was kind of prepping me for grad school. Certainly had a lot of fun, did a lot of things that anybody would as a student. But as I got to the University of Kentucky, I started to figure out that for me to explore more diverse career paths, it was probably in my second year where I started to say, perhaps retail, clinical, academic may not be my bailiwick. So I need to find what is mine. And here at UK, right, we're not in the heartland of the Northeast. We're not near New York City and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So it required a bit more of a, I guess, curiosity would be the word in terms of how I was going to explore opportunities to potentially navigate to the career, to the industry. And that's where luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So luck perhaps is not the right word, right? Because luck kind of implies that things just happen, right? It's that good things happen when you prepare and then when opportunity knocks. But the key is you have to put yourself in a position to knock on that door, to have somebody knock on that door for you. And I think that's one of my key takeaways when it comes to how I prepared myself here at UK, was by taking on as much incremental as I could, including exploring internships in the summertime, where I spent the summertime up in Waukegan, Illinois at Abbott Labs, working in pharmacovigilance, right? Of all things, whatever I could get, I took. Took an opportunity to lead as part of the Kentucky Academy of the Students of Pharmacy, which I believe has a new name now, which is the APHA chapter for our leadership. So taking as many opportunities as I could to put myself out there in a way, perhaps not intentionally to be competitive, but I bet that was probably in the back of my mind somewhere, but it was just more of a, let's explore this, let's see where this goes, let's see where this takes us. To where when I got to my fourth year, that's where it was like buying the lottery ticket. You can't win the lottery unless you buy a lottery ticket. So I had bought enough lottery tickets in terms of the experiences I had accrued to where when I got to my fourth year, I was far more competitive to join a company like J&J. And that's exactly how it happened. I got to my fourth year because of the doors I had knocked on and the connections that I had been able to make. got to one person who got me to one person who got me to an interview, who got me to another interview, graduated from UK, and 2 weeks later was moving up to New Jersey. 2 weeks later, moving up to New Jersey. Now, the irony as part of all this is, and mom remembers this, and as you can imagine, my dad is a 40-year academic professor. What do you think he thought about the industry? Dark side. The pharmaceutical industry was the dark side. Now, obviously, slightly tongue-in-cheek. I hope I'm going to get across to you today in a short 30 minutes that the industry is not the dark side. There are dark sides to every industry. There are plenty of examples I could show to you in a 10-second Google search about people who have done bad things in the manufacturer space. But what I can assure you is there's far more good than bad in terms of what we deliver as manufacturers in the healthcare space. But this was a bit tongue-in-cheek, if you will, in terms of how we talked about it. And he certainly was very proud of the path I had taken. And I know even after passing 12 years ago, he'd be incredibly proud of the career I've established. But this is, I think, a myth that we can all put to bed, that the manufacturer space, whether it's J&J or dozens of others, small, large, or medium-sized manufacturers, we are out there for good to help kind of evolve and eliminate disease across mankind. So as I was graduating, as you can imagine, I'm a Kentucky, born and bred, right? I had lived here, never gone further than 35 minutes away. And next thing I know, I'm packing up with my wife, no kids, and we're going up to New Jersey. So let me make this the interactive portion of the conversation. So somebody help me out. The first thing you hear when you hear the word New Jersey is what? Just throw things out. Turnpike, okay, what else? Casino, that's good. Traffic circles, yep, junk handles and traffic circles.
Garden State.
Garden State, that's good. All right, that must be somebody from New Jersey. That's good, because it's good farmland. Thank you for contributing on Zoom. I appreciate that. High taxes. All right, that's good. All good answers. What was in my mind was this. This is what I thought New Jersey was, but I was still willing to take that leap, right? Jersey Shore, I might have just dated myself. I realized Sopranos, I also might have just dated myself. But traffic, smog, casinos, crime, all those things were going through my head. And that's a horrible bias, I know, to anybody from New Jersey here or on Zoom from New Jersey. And I will tell you, like I said, I'm a big Jersey fan now. But these were the biases. These are the stories you tell yourself. But what I can assure you is that New Jersey, Pennsylvania, in the heartland, if you will, of where the manufacturers are, where the industry is, it really is a beautiful, beautiful place to live. So this is literally where I started, right? The Jansentitusville site. And this is the best picture I could find, but this is literally the entrance to the Jansentitusville site. As you can see the buildings in the back. The Jansentitusville site is literally built on a working cattle farm. It is as close as you can get to driving through Bourbon County or Woodford County, Kentucky, as you can imagine. The most beautiful 35-minute commute from home that you'd ever seen. 2 stoplights, nothing but clear road ahead. Really, really a beautiful spot. But this is where I was moving to when I started. And over the course of my 22 years with J&J, had multiple roles, which we'll talk about here in a second. But really, the appeal to J&J is something that was established back in 1943 by our founder, Robert Wood Johnson. It's what's called our credo. And sometimes I think the credo can come across perhaps as a little bit kitschy, like, do we really use this thing? Is this really part of our decision-making as a business, as a for-profit business? And we are a for-profit business. And I can assure you that this is referenced probably once a week by every employee. Like, what would the credo say? What should we do? And it's about establishing what are your priorities and who should you be thinking about first in terms of your decision making. As you can see, right? I won't read it all, but it starts with the doctors, nurses, patients. Then it moves to the employees. Then it moves to the communities, and then it moves to the shareholders, right? So the shareholders and the for-profit piece is last. Everything is about for patients, for providers, and that literally is the ethos that drives every decision that we make across J&J. So I wanted to make sure that that came across because, oftentimes, if you were to Google search J&J, this would probably be one of the first things that you see because it is so highly referenceable in terms of how we act on a day-to-day basis. But let me spend a little bit of time talking about what has my career trajectory been, right? So it was referenced up front. My current title is I'm a national sales director in our immunology business. So that probably means nothing to you. So I'll give you 30 seconds of what that means. I have the privilege of leading a large account team across our country. We have two J&J folks here, Mike and Sean, are part of the team who are responsible for making sure that the value that J&J can be delivered, that J&J can deliver, whether it's from an economic standpoint in our contracting, whether it's from clinical data, whether it's from health economics research, their job is to connect the stakeholders here at UK with the resources at J&J that can make UK more effective in accomplishing its mission. Accomplishing win-win missions is what our vision is as an account team in immunology, and every one of our therapeutic areas has it. We have oncology, immunology, neuroscience, infectious disease and vaccines, cardiovascular metabolism, pulmonary arterial hypertension. We have so many kind of functions across J&J, but every mission is the same. It's to extract the value and make sure that we are creating win-win solutions across the company. So that's the role I'm in now, which is technically a sales function. I've been in half my career in sales, half my career in strategic marketing, but started out actually in marketing. So when I was making that drive up 22 years ago, as an entry-level marketer, didn't know marketing from Adam, right? I was trying to pass my board exams, trying to become a registered pharmacist, and at the same time trying to figure out how to find the bathroom in that Titusville building. And over time, built up the competencies, built up the skills, the capabilities, the confidence, again, the intellectual capital to where then the emotional capital could take over. And I will definitively state what I referenced earlier, right? That is, I think, the key to success longer term in any career, whether it's the industry or others. It's how you make people feel, how you lead with intent and emotion versus the extraction, or I should say the exchange of intellectual information, which I think is just paid. That's table stakes in any job. So over the course of my career, every 2 to roughly 3 years, I've had the good opportunity that required me knocking and sometimes others knocking for me to move into new functions within J&J. That is a distinct and unique benefit of the industry, is that if you are easily bored, and I can get easily bored, every 2 to 3 years, there was a new challenge for me to take on. Again, luck favors, it's about opportunity and preparation. It requires knocking on the doors. It requires, finding those lottery tickets, if you will, or buying the lottery tickets to put yourself in a place to win. But that's where over the course of my career in sales, marketing, and also leadership excellence, a function that we literally have a function across J&J about how to teach people to be more effective leaders. I had the privilege of being in that role about 10 years ago and wouldn't trade it for a second. Again, all about how do you create meaningful impact in terms of moving teams and individuals towards greater performance. That's a little bit about kind of my career, my perspective. Probably a good time. Any questions either in the room or by Zoom that I might be able to address just in terms of my perspective, because where we're going to transition next is what might you need to know if this is something you're interested in exploring as a career in pharmaceutical industry. Any questions? Please. Yeah, great question. So Dr. Kuhn asked the question, what did I bring as a Pharm.D to the marketing function that differentiated me versus an MBA from Northwestern or from University of Chicago or similar, right? Because that would be the expectation, is they're probably more prepared than we. And let me put that to bed. That is absolutely not the case. The way I always reference it with the Pharm.D is that the Pharm.D is part of my DNA and it is part of my day-to-day. There hasn't been one single decision or one single strategy developed that wasn't rooted somewhere in the clinical belief, in the background, and the understanding of the full healthcare ecosystem that comes with the Pharm.D degree. That is why you're going to get to the recruiting picture in a second, where you're going to hear that again and see that again as to why the Pharm.D is so valued. Now, I will tell you, I am kind of carrying the flag a little bit right now that I want to see more PharmDs in the commercial space. When I say commercial, that is a bit more in my path, right? Which is sales and marketing. Because the doors aren't as open, but my intention is to kick them more open across J&J and help people kind of realize that that's a fascinating career path that perhaps folks thought wasn't possible, and I can assure you that it is. So I really appreciate that question, because that was certainly in the back of my mind as I started, right? Because when you get initial coaching and advice about careers you could potentially explore in the industry, the feedback is usually, well, you can go to medical, you can go to medical science liaison, you can go into health outcomes and research, and you can go into these very more traditional paths, but there are plenty of non-traditional that we'll talk about here in a second that may be more well suited for everybody. So thank you for that question. Any others? Yes, please. Great question. So the question is, how did I land on marketing? Was it intentional, or a little? I'm going to kind of also add on to it. Was it intentional, or was a little bit of luck involved? And I'll say it was a little bit of both. Back to that kind of preparation and opportunity. Luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. When I did that internship at Abbott in pharmacovigilance, which is a very kind of classic traditional entry point for a PharmD, where you're starting to evaluate adverse event data for reporting back to the FDA. It was great, but I took every opportunity I could to set up one-on-ones with sales and marketing leaders, with others. And let's just say it was a bit more of an attraction than it was perhaps a reality that I thought I could actually pursue. And the luck part of it, when I was in my fourth year, was just more of a, I'm going to pursue it. I'm going to pursue it hard, and I'm going to find the right people that I can talk to. And that's where I found a couple of connections within J&J who created the right conversations at the right time with the right role, where I could go in, compete, interview, and demonstrate that I was the right fit for them. Did they need to take a chance on me? Absolutely. There weren't PharmDs in marketing 22 years ago. But we have plenty today, because I think we've trailblazed a little bit. There's more recognition of the value delivered because of, again, that expertise that really is unquestionable in the pharma space. Great question. I'm going to do a quick time check. Any other questions here? Any questions on Zoom? No questions. Okay, thank you. All right, so a little bit about me. Now I'm going to shift to what do you need to know? Like, if you're curious, right? And that's one of the themes I'm hoping that comes out of this is be curious and be uncommon. Because I think competitiveness is where those two things kind of match. You really got to be curious to explore, and then you got to be uncommon and show up in a way where you make yourself unquestionably the best talent that the organization would want to hire. So the questions you might have: what, who, where, when, why, how? What do I need to know to explore this type of career? I've kind of referenced this slide already. I jumped ahead, but this is why the value is built in to the PharmD, right? Not only that, you're exploring a PharmD from one of the top 5, top 10 institutions in pharmacy, right? And that in and of itself has value. So embrace that, right? I certainly embrace that. I'll say I bragged about that, as we should, right? You got to brag at the right times, because you put yourself through the best program. Otherwise, you'd put yourself through any program. You competed to get into the best, leverage that, and that's ultimately what's going to get you to where you want to go if this is a career path that you're interested in. But it's that clinical acumen coupled with the in-depth healthcare ecosystem knowledge of understanding how payers work, how evidence is generated, how data is distributed, how the FDA works, how regulatory bodies work. All of this kind of imputes to where you create a competitiveness to when you show up. The people on the other end of the desk don't have that. What they have is what could be a 5, 10, 15-year linear career in one function. They don't have what you have here, so they need to hire that talent. And that's why PharmDs are so attractive in this space. So these are a couple of functions, if you wanted to take some notes, where the path is pretty clear in terms of where PharmDs have led, and led with great significance in the industry. R&D is an obvious one, right? Very clear and strong path there. The commercial one, I've spent a pretty good time there. That's been my path, right? Business development, licensing, finding new therapeutics to either purchase or to operationalize or commercialize. Early stage, late stage. Market access marketing, that is the future. Market access marketing is absolutely the future. The table stakes of marketing is about putting out evidence to clinically differentiate products, right? To clinically create competitiveness, if you will, in a marketplace. Market access is understanding how that clinical differentiate then translates to the payers, which then translates to the providers, which allows more patients to get started and stay on critical treatments with health equity in mind. And I think that's the important piece too, is that it can no longer be those who have and those who have not. We at J&J have a very strong strategy towards trying to make sure that anybody who needs our treatment can get our treatments, whether it's through commercial payers, government payers, or through our assistance foundations. Very, very important. The market access marketing and ensuring that everybody who deserves, everybody who needs, gets access to our treatments is very, very important. Advocacy, as you can see, medical, regulatory, pharmacovigilance. I'm not going to read these because, as you can imagine, we could spend probably a half hour on each of these, and I'm happy to stay after if anybody has specific questions on any of these. But every function is integrated and works with the next. I think that's an important piece. There is no silo across how you commercialize both early development and then ultimately bringing operationalizing a product into the marketplace. Every one of these functions has to work together to create a safe experience for patients as they're starting on any treatment. Maybe this is also a good place. Any questions on these functions? Again, I'm happy to. Yes, please. That's good to see you too.
It's Dave. Phil, yeah, good to see you. So some of our students our Pharm.D students are also getting a master's degree in pharmaceutical sciences, doing a research project and exploring that. Are there any of these that master's degree also would elevate their ability or maybe target them to one of these pathways?
Yes. Good question. So Dave Field just asked a question. Would a master's degree on top of the Pharm.D amplify competitiveness for any one of these particular roles? And for example, would an MPH or an MBA in particular, I'm going to highlight those two, be particularly advisable? And I will say one of my biggest regrets of pharmacy school is not doing that concurrently. And that was just self-doubt more than anything. Like, could I handle two curricula at the same time and getting an MBA? I wish I had done it. If anybody's exploring it and you're interested in this path, please do it. Any one of those, MBA or MPH. But to the question, I believe it makes for hyper competitiveness in the commercial space. I mean, hyper competitiveness. And about what you'll see in a second, about 20% of the candidates that come through our fellowship program that I've worked with in marketing functions, I'm working now in sales function as well. About 20% of the people who come through those programs are with one of those advanced degrees on top of the Pharm.D. A great question. Another one is advocacy from a public health standpoint, Masters of Public Health. Advocacy that's going to be a booming next generation type of creation. Again, back to health equity. This is about working with payers, working with government agencies to ensure that, again, those who need can gain access to medications, and working through every advocacy channel, whether it's J&J's or whether it's through any major societies. It's finding the right levers to pull to make sure that anybody who needs treatment can get it. Good question. So a little bit more detail about what I've already referenced, which is a fellowship, right? So after pharmacy school, and I think this is the best possible opportunity for an entry point into what are non-starting level roles. And I think I want to say that again. The fellowship puts people in opportunities where you're doing the same job as what would be a 5 to 10 year MBA or somebody else who entered the organization years ago. And the expectation is high, the outputs are insignificant, and it is a crucible for development in 24 months that establishes a very clear path to the industry. Sometimes within the same company that you're working for, sometimes within others. But I want to give a little bit of background on the Rutgers Fellowship Program, which I've become more entrenched with, because I think it is the question I often get as I've traveled to mid-year and others is where do I start? And I always haven't had a great answer to that question. I do have a great answer to it now. And I've got examples of people I've worked with in this program that I think are just top notch. But as you can see, the fellowship started in 1984. Now it boasts over 1,000 alumni. This isn't just with J&J. This is across multiple companies in the fellowship. And I kind of reference this, right? It provides opportunities at non-entry level positions and the development to refine advanced leadership networking, to create connections that will sustain the rest of your career. This is a fantastic entry point to explore at mid-year. for next year, obviously, because the current cohort has been defined. But this is kind of what it looks like. So each year, just south of 1,000 students apply for these fellowships. I believe we should see more University of Kentucky people coming through that. I always ask every year, like, how many UK fellows do we have? I think we've got one right now. We need more. We need more people interested in this. And as you can see, it works through mid-year, works through Rutgers. They're kind of the conduit between J&J and the fellowship. And ultimately, these are the companies that you can see that are established that create those pathways. Janssen and Johnson at the top. Obviously, I am biased that I believe we deliver the best possible experience. But as you can see, about 148 are accepted for 1 to 2 year fellowships across 20 companies. So that's not a bad hit rate. It's, roughly 15–20% of those who apply and pursue are accepted into the program. And I can tell you it is a very rewarding experience, recognizing it does require people to move up to the Northeast where most of these organizations exist. Obviously easy for Rutgers because it's actually Rutgers is about a block away from our world headquarters in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Literally, we share a campus as J&J World Headquarters with Rutgers. But a little bit more about the Rutgers program curriculum, including what I think is a fantastic utilization of the FOSTER acronym on the left. We don't use FOSTER as an acronym, or FOSTER as a verb enough, as far as I'm concerned. You can see here a little bit more background here on the focus on growth and development, focus on the industry and creating that breadth and depth of experience to where you're able to be exposed beyond just one single function. The Rutgers specific activities that are part of kind of the educational process. And lastly, the professional development day series. So this gives you a little bit more understanding of the context behind the program and how thoughtful it has been designed. Here at J&J, we started in 1998. We have 40 current fellows across multiple functions that you'll hear in a second, 28 total fellowships recruited for next year. And here's a little bit more background on first and second year fellows. So we took 10 in our Janssen corporate, consumer and corporate side of things. So that's probably less pharmaceutical oriented, more business oriented, but certainly a great experience. I am more I guess, knowledgeable in terms of the people I've interacted with from the program, with the commercial, the medical R&D, and these are the number of fellowships and what they're doing. These are what the fellows are doing within J&J today. And you can see commercial insights and strategy, marketing. So the immunology marketing, those two there are the ones that I work with on a practically a day-to-day basis as we define strategies to help in our immunology business. And then you can see at the bottom here, medical R&D and other as well. Lastly, these are the criteria. I know these are data-heavy slides, but this is the context you would see is at mid-year in terms of information you would get in terms of competitiveness. But it gives you a sense of what does it take to be competitive for these types of programs. And I'll look at I'll steer you to the candidate requirements, and I'll reference Dr. Fiola's question. Right, the MBA is optional, but as you can see, 20% do have those dual degrees, and I would tell you it is an accelerant. It is a differentiator. But I wouldn't also use it as a deterrent. If you are not pursuing an additional advanced degree, don't look at that as a reason not to compete. Just know that you're going to need to find ways to differentiate yourself, as I had referenced in terms of the experiences I had here at UK. Put yourself out there, right? Be curious, be uncommon, and ultimately you're going to differentiate as you show up if this is of interest. So with that concludes kind of the formal part of the conversation here. And I will tell you, thank you. I appreciate the questions. Happy to stay after for any dialogue, leave my business card for any people who have questions long-term. Recognizing again, coming back to Dr. Thomas Foster, a legacy of leadership and mentorship, happy to continue that as anybody wants to engage ongoing to explore further conversations about the industry. But appreciate everybody joining today, both live and virtually. And it's good to be back in Kentucky. Thank you. Are there any questions that I can take from up here, either by chat, by Zoom? You can obviously speak up on Zoom. We can hear you fine. Please. Yeah, I think, obviously, oh yeah, thank you. The question is what type of qualities, and I'll use the word with qualities and competencies, I think make people most competitive for a fellowship, including one that may go to J&J. I'm not sure that there is a formula. And having interviewed hundreds of people over the course of my career, sometimes it's a feeling, right? In terms of, and again, I probably over-index a little bit more on emotional intelligence than I do on even sometimes intellectual intelligence. But I would urge people to think about how you show up sometimes is more important than what you show up with. So what you have on paper is important because that's the table stakes to get you to the table, to get you to the interview, to get you to be able to communicate your value proposition to somebody who's making a hiring decision. It's when you show up, it's how you demonstrate that motivational fit, that energy, that enthusiasm, that willingness to learn, that willingness to dig in. Those are the intangibles that aren't necessarily competencies, but to your point, they are definitive qualities that any good interviewer would be looking for. What's going to show up on paper is already going to be strong because you're going to have a pharmd, and perhaps an advanced degree from one of the best pharmacy institutions in the country. I will say, I think we need to create better awareness because there's too much bragging about what the better institutions are in the Northeast versus Kentucky, right? They need to know the talent that comes out of this institution. And that's part of my mission as well. Great question. Yes, please. Great question. Yep, great question. So the question is, how does the process work relative to like who is making the hiring decision, and can preference be established to say, hey, I want to go into immunology marketing. Can I interview with Scott Foster to go directly into that position? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The Rutgers Fellowship, right? The leaders of that fellowship are the ones that are vetting the candidates and then establishing essentially the cohorts are going to be coming through either the corporate consumer or the pharmaceutical side of the program. That being said, there is influence from, we have a leadership team across J&J of fellowship alums who are part of that process who do have perhaps a stronger voice. So I have, as in preparation for this conversation, I reached out to one of the directors to kind of talk about how all that works and to kind of express my interest in establishing myself as an executive sponsor for the fellowship so that I can understand at a different level how I can help kind of narrate and navigate more people to the right roles. So the short answer is you don't get to pick and choose, but you can establish and state preference. And I think that would be my to also the question that you asked, sir. I think it's if your intention is you want to get into, for example, commercial marketing, put yourself out there, be very specific, put your vision into motion, and don't stop till you get there. And if you start in somewhere else in pharmacovigilance, it doesn't mean that you couldn't rotate later to a marketing position at a later date. I think the key takeaway should be get in, and once you're in, then steer the boat to where you want to go. Please. Great question. The question is, does J&J offer internships, for example, summer internships that create a pipeline into perhaps more competitiveness into a fellowship program like we just referenced? Unfortunately, my answer to that is I don't know, but I suspect yes. I would imagine that there are, and I know that there are internships in finance and there's internships in others, but I don't, I'm not aware of it. I've never worked with an intern on a summer intern. But it could be something you just planted a seed that I need to figure out if we can create these 2 to 3 month type of rotations for people to get that competitiveness. So, right. Great question. Yep. That's exactly what I did at Abbott Labs after my third year of pharmacy school, or second year. Third year was going to the clinical, but yeah, my second year I worked at Abbott as a pharmacovigilance intern. One of the greatest experiences. Got to hang out with my brother-in-law and sister, for the summer up in Chicago. It was a good time. Highly recommend. Active rotations? Oh, for the fourth year clinicals? Yeah, we don't, to my knowledge. Good question. Again, things that need to be trailblazed. Because we don't doesn't mean we can't. It just means we haven't yet. That's exactly. You never know, right? And that's I will say that we should all have the willingness to adapt, and I've seen us come a long way in terms of course, my 22 years career, in terms of how we valued the pharmd, in terms of how we've recruited into this fellowship program, how we have created exposure points for them, but we've still got work to do. I think that's fair. All right, any questions online? I know I'm kind of right where I wanted to be in terms of timing goal, 30 minutes and then roughly 10, 15 minutes of questions. And I'm certainly happy to stay, but I also want to be respectful of the fact that everybody needs to get their blood sugar going as well. Excellent. All right, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. And again, happy to stay behind, leave business cards or anything, but really been great being with you guys. Thanks.